rest of the feedback. So we're going to go here. So looking at your previous pieces, of course, they're still working really well. I think you can tell the difference between this and this, where all of your highlights just kind of disappear because of the white. But I'm actually the one you finally turned in as revised. I actually think this is the one that's working best of all. Um, so there's a couple of things in here that I would be interested to see you play around with in the color as well. One of those being, what you seem to have here is sort of these two shades of pretty dark colors. One is almost completely black, and one of them is a pretty dark blue. And then you have this light gray, which is sort of your base color, and then white as your highlight, or your mid-tone color, and then your highlight. So I think what I would be interested in, I think that could be interesting to see is going from white to gray to this, slightly darker blue, and then instead of to this black color, which may not be completely black, try pulling a little bit of this blue hue into it. Possibly even toning down just a touch of this blue, making it just a touch lighter. Playing with that just a little bit, and I think just to see that way you can have a value range, because these are both really dark, and what really feels like happening is they're both really dark, but just a slightly different color, and so it's kind of hard to tell which one's supposed to be darker than the other. Even though black is darker than the other, that blue is kind of getting this weird like photo negative thing going on there. So I would consider making the dark a really dark blue, and then making this dark blue just a touch lighter, just very very small amount lighter. And I like this choice of the darker background here. I think you could bump that down a touch if you wanted to, but I don't think you have to. So I think you could play around with that a little bit. Otherwise, I really like this one. Um, I still think it's kind of interesting that the dark highlights really only seem to be happening in his face, and you don't get very much of it going down here in the jacket. I would consider maybe adding just a touch, maybe around the tie, or something just to sort of pop some of that out volume-wise. But otherwise, I think it's working pretty well. I see. It's because he's got the shadow kind of casting onto his face. Um, yeah, I'm not really sure that's reading as that quite as much. I guess it kind of is, um, but otherwise, that would be the only little thing is I would think about tweaking on this one. So, Michaela, I think a lot of the stuff in this one we covered in the critique. I actually really like the sort of bubbly style that you have going on, these highlights in the head. But then you get like a slightly different style in the jacket, which feels a little bit more traditional to not traditional, but a little bit more standard to what a lot of people have been going with. But you almost get these photorealistic eyes, and then you get this really cartoony hair. And so I think that you need to get a little bit more consistent in the style. The style I'm actually liking quite a bit is what you got going on here in the face. And I like this as well. So I mean, I think somewhere between those two, you can kind of bridge that. But I do feel like he needs a touch of information in his beard, even if it's just sort of defining some of these little dark shapes here, as using like one of these slightly darker colors, maybe this dark color that's in his hair here. Um, but that's really my biggest note is mainly in the beard. I think if you just touched up the beard a little bit, that would really help. Um, I'm not feeling. Maybe I haven't actually gotten the most up-to-date version, but I'm not really feeling a lot of the changes from the feedback. So yeah, I would consider sort of tweaking around on some of those, but otherwise that one's looking pretty good. Um, Nathan, yours is I can tell a lot, even without having to flip back and forth. I can tell quite a bit of the feedback on yours being implemented in here. You really brought out some of the jacket here to get rid of that like really darky or darkness out here in this jacket that's really like void of any light. And so by adding these little highlights in here, that's really kind of helping. I think you could pull back on them just a touch if you wanted to. Like they maybe it's almost getting as bright as this side of the jacket, and I liked having one side a little darker. Um, but that's just me. Maybe not make them quite as bold. Have them just kind of fading off a little bit, or something like that. That may be worth considering. I like the addition of the eyes, but they still feel like they need to be fleshed out a little bit more in getting a little bit more definition in there. They feel a little like kind of like sticker eyes, like they. And so he's got um, sort of some. I think that this is kind of like you have the idea of an eye here, but kind of just look at the values here because it is quite a bit of dark with a little white highlight or with a couple of little white highlights to sort of bring out the shapes. So I think it would be almost closer to this with just a couple of highlights to really bring that out, as opposed to sort of this gray eye with a black dot in it. So um, otherwise, this one's looking really good to me. Sorry, just flipping back and forth. This is neat to see. But yeah, I think it actually is working really well. So um, and yeah, those would just be a few little tweaks that I would consider. Okay, Patrick. I liked this one. I like this one even more. So I don't. I don't have a lot of other feedback. We've kind of looked at this one pretty closely, and it just works really well. Again, I don't ever think I'm going to be like the color is perfect. Never consider changing any of the color. Like I think that this is one that when you're choosing some pretty drastic nuclear colors here, you could consider how you could play with that even more and just keep playing with color until you just find the one that you absolutely love. But this is actually a pretty good choice in my mind. I would still say it's worth looking at sort of some color change, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. And I think we talked just a little bit about it, about possibly getting just a touch more light in his eyes. They're kind of sunk in there a little bit, but you see, like if we look at the original image, this white section here almost has that same brightness as some of this area up here. So I wonder just pulling just a little highlight here or there into the eye may just kind of round that out. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that I would want to try and see what that does with the eyes because they do kind of feel like these dark voids there. To see if that brings it out just a touch, but otherwise, those are just very nitpicky things. I think this one is really neat. And I really love the wispy hair. Like I think the wild color choices are really helping with that. It almost feels more wispy than the original image, uh, so that's working pretty well. Let's see. Okay, Hunter. Um, let's. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of flipping back and forth. Um, I feel like you got some pretty decent stuff going on in the hair here, and I kind of like the tie. The face just still feels like it needs some more work to me. I could just I'm getting the hints of the shadows, but you're really just kind of working with these two colors. Um, and you got a range of other colors that you could kind of be bringing in there. Um, I feel like there's a little bit of distortion in the actual shape of the head, but like the nose, it's just really hard to kind of make out where the line of the nose is to define that. I mean, I'm getting the indication of the character, but it still feels like it needs quite a bit of refinement just to kind of really bring out those details that sell it undeniably as this character or as this person. So just kind of looking back and forth at it, like even this really dark shadow here, what could you do to kind of bring that in there to kind of get some of that detail in? And so just um, looking at the reference versus what you get here, I think the thing you need to be aware of is kind of what I've mentioned with a few other people is instead of drawing the idea of an eye, draw just the forms that you're seeing, and be confident that by illustrating some of those forms correctly, the eye will make itself evident, right? As um, so I think that would be sort of my advice. It's just feeling kind of flat, and I'm just not getting some of those forms popping out of there. So I would really kind of recommend going back in and trying to find some ways to just making those. And I guess you're probably using this as a on top of the original image, so you can can sort of find those forms exactly. And if not, let me know and I can help you get that set up. But I think that would be my biggest feedback for that is just to kind of find those forms and really try to hammer them in so we can make out some of these details and start finding the shapes within here more clearly. Sean, I'll be honest. I like the revision. I think the revision's actually working pretty well. The only thing that's still kind of throwing me is this darker purple, which I was still reading as I just can't help but read that as a highlight, but it's actually darker than the sort of the mid-tone color of the skin. And when I look at the reference, I do think that that's what that is sort of the highlight section. So I don't know. That's just me. It's starting to get kind of that photo negative feel to it. I do think some of the sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. I do think some of the stuff that you've done in the face here to kind of clear up the mouth and some of these shapes is really working pretty successfully. And I think between the two revisions there, yeah, like the nose, that's just a little bit more clear now. And I think you made some good decisions on that. I think defining some of the jacket with the lines is really helping as well. So there's some good improvements here. The only thing that's really getting me now is sort of the darks in the face that just kind of photo negative effect for me there. Sierra, I think um, you kind of did a good job at kind of going back here and reworking some of this. Um, I think that you really kind of helped the corner of the mouth here with that area and kind of broke that up a little bit more. So I'm just kind of flipping back and forth here a little bit. Um, I think the tie. Sorry, I'm just kind of looking here. Yeah, I think I actually like how this is feeling to me. The only thing that's really sort of poking me in the eye right now is, and I don't know why, I don't really feel like this was mentioned very much in the critique. I feel like this one shoulder is really big, and then this one's kind of smaller. And when I go in here and look, I think that maybe that's an illusion that's happening because it's getting cut off in your reference. But I do really feel like this needs to kind of come back in and maybe end almost there. And so kind of squashing this back in and kind of getting him. He's just got a big shoulder on this side, and for some reason that's not something I had noticed. I guess because in the first one it wasn't quite as noticeable, but that's just really feeling like it's kind of popping out there a little too far. So, um, and we'll um, I'm gonna be honest. There are things I could point out that I would try, but I can't point out anything that I can just straight up say I think that was a bad decision or I think that's something you should change. The things that I would think maybe to try a little bit is to add just a touch of a hint of where the lips separate, and maybe just a touch of a hint of some of the lines in the face here. I would try those very cautiously if you did want to change anything on it, because this is working so well as such an iconic. Like I could trim out just this and print that out, and people would know exactly what it is. So all this eye stuff and this mouth stuff and this wrinkly forehead, you're just really nailing the face there really well. So there's not a lot that I would say to particularly change on this. I think it's very successful. It's one of those things where I would again recommend to everybody pretty much just to go in and play with the colors. You've picked some very bold colors and it's selling that character well, or selling that idea well of who the character is. It's kind of unmistakable, even though that's not really the colors. Like this is feeling much more like the comic book. I like the addition of the vest arm there and sort of some of the cleanup you've done in there. But overall, this one's just really pretty strong. There's not a ton of stuff that I would say to change on it. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, use these feedbacks or this feedback as a sort of a guide on revisions you can make, and if you're unhappy with your grade, and if you would want even more feedback, you can come and speak with me personally, and I can help you kind of work through it. But use those to sort of make changes for your revision, and let me know, and I'll be more than happy to reconsider your grade after you've turned in an additional revision. So this is kind of just your guide on where to target to do that revision. So let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.